Hey, Aharon Rabinowitz here, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to create Greebles in VideoCopilot's Element 3D. Greebles, also called nernnies, are little objects that stick out from the main object to create the look of complexity. Now we're going to do this by using a cool feature you may know about, but that's kind of hidden in Element, and so a lot of people don't. Element gives you the ability to take a 3D object and use it as a particle grid, basically allowing you to generate particles along the faces of a 3D object. And those particles can be all the same, or you can use many different 3D objects as your particle. And you can use simple shapes, or you can even use complex 3D models as your Greebles. The key here is that if you want a lot of nernnies, man, I love saying that. If you want a lot of nernnies, you're going to need a 3D model that has a lot of faces. So I'm going to quickly jump into Cinema 4D to create a simple cube with many faces. And from there, we'll use that as our particle grid in Element. If you've never used Cinema 4D, well, this is about as simple as it gets. Okay, I need to interrupt this tutorial to show you something that will mean you don't actually need to go to Cinema 4D. To be honest with you, I didn't realize this till near the end of the tutorial when I was recording, and I noticed this button up here, and I've seen it before, and I've noticed that you have these objects that you can add, but I didn't think that they were actually objects you could really alter, so I never really worked with them. But when I, on a whim, clicked on it, I noticed that there were settings for the size segments and the curve, the softness of the edges and whatnot. So I went in and I get rid of that, get rid of the chamfer and the segments there. I'm going to set this to 10 by 10 by 10. And this will create pretty much the exact same effect of doing what I'm about to show you in Cinema 4D, and probably without some of the problems that I face when bringing in Cinema 4D models into Element. So here you go. So you can skip that and you can just do this straight in Element and get the same effect that you will see we will get from bringing in a 3D cube with lots of faces from Cinema 4D into Element. Alright, well, nobody's perfect. Anyway, let's just jump back in time to the moment where I did not know that you could do this, and I run through the process very quickly in Cinema 4D, and we'll go from there. You're welcome. So here I am in Cinema 4D, and I'm just going to click on this Create Cube button right here, and it's added a cube. I'm going to go into the display settings and set it to constant shading lines so that we can see the faces of this object. Now right now each side only seems to have one face, but if we come over to the segments here and I make each of these 10 instead of 1, you can see that we've now got 10 by 10 by 10. It's a lot of faces, and that's what we needed to go with that. Now, another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a material. Now, you don't really need to do this, but I have found that things behave a lot better in Element if you apply a material, because from there, what will happen is when I hit C to convert it into an editable object, which I'm going to do right now, I get this UV mapping, and essentially that fixes some problems that you might have encountered in Element in After Effects. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go to File and Export, and I will choose Wavefront Object, and I'll click on OK, and I will save this as Cube. That's it, we're done with Cinema 4D. Okay, now in After Effects, I'm going to add in a new solid, make it the same size as the comp. I'll click OK, and then I'll choose Effect, VideoCopilot, and I'll head over to Element, and from there, I'm just going to jump right into the scene setup. Now here in Element, I am going to click on Import, and I'll bring in my cube, and I'll click Open, and there it is. There's our cube. Now the next thing I want to do is add all of the shapes, or we'll start with one that we're going to put all over this 3D object. And we'll do that by coming over to here, and I'm going to go to V1 Icons and Primitives. Now, you may not have this, and if you don't have it, it's because maybe you bought Element 2 instead of Element 1. I bought 1 and then upgraded, but these shapes are available to you. These models are there on the VideoCopilot.net site. If you go to download Element, just go back to your login, your account, and this is one of the options for you to download as a package on its own. Now, I could use a box, which is what I probably should use. I wanted to look the right way, but because I want to keep things really simple, at least in our initial explanation, let's try something else. Maybe we can go with, let's pick a shape here. Why don't we go with these triangle balls right here? Okay, so you can't see the triangle ball right now because it's in the same folder with this with this cube, and it sort of combined the objects. So I'm going to move triangle ball out, I'm going to move cube out, I'm going to delete the folder. Now if I select triangle ball, there, I can see that this is here, and I can see that the cube is here, and they're both part of group 1, and I want that, but I do need to make a change. Right here on the cube, if you notice, there's this little symbol right here that is a particle symbol, and you can see that the same symbol is here. This tells me that Element will treat this like it's a 3D particle, but I don't want to treat this cube like it's a particle. I want it to be the particle grid. So I'm going to click on that little icon, and that changes it into a ring with lots of circles, and that shows that it's essentially a grid now. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, and when we get out, I'm just going to see this ball that we created. I'm also going to add in a new camera just so that we have a 3D camera to work with, and I will zoom out a little bit. Okay, so back here, what we need to do is we need to tell Element to use that cube that we added in as a particle grid. So I'll go into the particle replicator settings, and for the replicator shape, and let me just pull this out so we can read some more of the words, we'll change it from point, we'll go to 3D object. And so it knows that it should be using the cube, and if you look, let me just again pull out here, and I'll rotate around. We've got lots of these shapes going on here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to change the size of the particles themselves. So let's just head over into the particle look, and I'll change the particle size down quite a bit. And you can see now we've got particles that are sort of populating this invisible cube. But you know what? I do want to see a cube. So what I'll do is I'm going to go back into the scene here, and I'm going to add in another cube. I'll just duplicate this cube. So I'll hit Control D. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this one to group 2 and make sure that it's treated as a particle. So now we've got particles, we have particles in group 1 and group 2. So if you know, Element can have up to 5 groups of different particles. So now we can see that I've got this other cube in the background there, and also that it's not affected by the changes that I'm making to group 1. So if I go in to change the size again, you can see that I'm only affecting these particles because group 2 controls this cube. Okay, so I made changes to it. Now you notice that the circles, these little balls, are not covering the entire cube. That's because up here we have 3D object percentage. I'm going to change that to 100%. I'm also going to go into the particle size random to randomize the size, right? So now we've got these little things all over this shape. Okay, now let's see if we can make this look more like the kind of standard Greebles that we've come to know and love. So I'm going to jump back into the scene setup, and I'm going to get rid of this this triangle ball, and I'll start with, let's go with a box. And that's it for that. I'll just click on OK, and we'll take a look out here. By the way, notice one thing. I've seen this happen a couple of times where the boxes here at the top, they end up like turned on an angle on the top and bottom face. And I don't know why that happens, but I've noticed that if I go back into the scene setup and I re-import the cube, so wait, let me just first delete this, the cube, and I'll go to File, Import, and again, or I can just click on Import, and I'll add the cube. I'll click on Open, and again, do the same thing, and I'll just make sure that it's using this as a grid, and I click OK. Corrects itself. Not sure what's happening, but I've noticed it a few times. Okay, so now this looks more like what we know, Greebles and Nernies to look like. So we've got cubes, right? I'm going to go back into the scene setup, and I'm going to start adding other shapes. Why don't we take something like, let's add in a ring, and we can add in, let's see, how about some tube like there, tubes like that, and even, is there a pyramid here? I thought I'd seen one before. Come back up over here. There it is, and add that in. Okay, so now we've got a lot of shapes, and I'm going to click on OK. And so we can see that we've got all these shapes. One thing I want to change is the angle at which they're at. When it was a cube, it didn't really matter, but take a look. You can see that the rings are sort of sideways. So I can go into the particle look here, and I'll go into particle rotation, and let's see, maybe it's the X rotation. Let's find out. It is. So why don't I just make that 90-degree rotation? And now we've got this stuff. It all sort of kind of looks like it's part of the same thing. And another thing I'll do is, just for the sake of making it really simple to look at, I'm going to give them all the same material, just because it will look a little bit nicer. And I'll click OK. And that looks pretty cool. Obviously not as cool as some of the complex stuff I was showing at the beginning, and I'll show you how to do that next. But one thing I think is worth noting is that if I go into the render settings here, and I turn up ambient occlusion, right? So we'll turn it on, right? We start getting stuff that looks a little bit cooler. I'm going to bring up the intensity of the ambient occlusion, and check that out. That's starting to look pretty cool, right? Although, you know, I'm looking at this and I see now that the pyramids must be backwards, so maybe I need to go -90 on that rotation. So let's come back here and try -90, and there we go. Now we've got some pyramids. But you do notice that, like, I think the shapes are kind of inside. They've moved into sort of inside the cube, and I don't want that. So what I'll do is I'm just going to come in here, and if I go back into my setup here, I'm going to select, for example, let's take the pyramid. And if you notice, it's sticking through the floor. So I can set its alignment from model center to bottom. And now if I go out, you'll see that the pyramids are all sticking up a little bit more. And I can do that for all the shapes, but you get the idea. And that's going to be important for later when we start adding in these cool things. But essentially now you can see that we've got this grid of particles all over. And I can keep adding shapes. Maybe you want to get even crazier. Let's see what else, other shapes we can add and see what happens. Why don't we go with this cylinder and maybe this capsule, and let's take a look at that. All right, so you can see we've got all these cool shapes. Forgot to add the material to them, so let's go back. Cylinder, capsule there, yep, we got it, and click OK. Okay, so now you've created this thing full of all of these little things. It looks pretty cool. Okay, let's go a little further and make something that's super cool. So I'm going to jump back into Element, and I'm going to get rid of the shapes we don't need. So basically everything other than the 2 cubes. And from here, remember, 1 cube is going to be the surface and 1 is going to be the base of the grid. So, okay, let me also clear up unused materials here. And I'm going to be using some of the models from Motion Design 2. If you don't have it, you can try to find other little Greeble type things on the internet, or you could buy this pack from VideoCopilot. It's super awesome, has lots of stuff in here. And I'm going to kind of jump a little bit around here as I do this, because the fact is that there's a lot of pieces that I'd want to add in. And if I make you watch me the entire time as I pick them out, we're going to be sitting here a while. But why don't we start with just a couple of them and try to pick up a couple of pieces. So mech spotlight here, okay? And I want to note the size, right? Because what's going to happen is I'm going to add in other shapes and other 3D objects, and I want them all to be relatively the same size. And circular or square shaped is going to be ideal instead of having some that are differently shaped. So if I were to head over to something like the, let's see, the Tech Tubes Pipes, and I was going to use Pipe Junction 01, I'm going to want to make sure that it's the same size. So this is a bit smaller, so I might want to increase the size of it so that it kind of matches. We'll go back to my spotlight. They're pretty much the same. Let me just do even a little bit bigger. Okay, and what if I'm doing things that are rectangular, right? And that happens too. So let's go over to beams, right? They're up here. There's beams, and you can see these are all long. I'm going to grab something like this one right here. Obviously, that's much bigger, and so what I want to do is scale it down. But if I look, right, so we're getting close. Let me just scale that even a little more. Scale it down. The problem is that it is a rectangle instead of a square, and that's fine if you don't mind, but I actually prefer to have like square shapes because it really does help to fill up the cube as we're trying to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt button and drag, and that will create a duplicate. All right, and I'll just put them next to each other. And one thing you'll notice is it's created a group folder, so it will treat these 2 different objects like they are in fact one particle. Right? So I'm going to move this whole group over a little and just kind of center it. Okay, so I've got beam 1, I've got the pipe junction, I've got the spotlight. Let's just start with these, right? And let's take a look. So let's just click OK. And now we've got all these different shapes. And okay, that's looking pretty good, but obviously there's some things we need to do. So let's go back in there. some of it is going to be that we need to set the alignment properly, right? So let's make sure that the alignment is set to the bottom, right? So we'll do bottom for that one and this one. And we'll come to the pipe junction box and again do the bottom. And the next spotlight will go to the bottom again. And that's it. So with that done, oh, one other thing, obviously the materials don't really match too well. Let me just apply to our cube, the one that we can see. Just for now, we'll put the plastic black, but we probably should choose a different material. Let's click OK. And then I'm going to scale up the particles. So let me just get into particle look here and scale up the particle size. All right, starting to look pretty good. Now, one thing I notice is that all of these objects are aligned exactly the same way in every instance that they are. So in other words, like you see how these are all going in the same direction. We want to alter that direction. We want to make it so that that's a bit more randomized. So what I'll do is I'm going to go back over to the particle look and I'm going to go into rotation. So particle rotation in here. And within that, there's rotation random. That's not what I want to use. I want to use randomize angle. So let's try, I think the Z-axis is where I want to do it. And if I set it to 90, it'll use 90 degree increments to rotate it. So for the circle stuff, you may not notice it, but you certainly can notice it here. Some of these are horizontal and some of these are vertical, so we're getting a lot better. I think that spotlight object is probably a little too big compared to how it's the rest of the things are in there. So I might go back in here and start making more changes. So again, I'll just go to the spotlight and I'll probably scale that down just a little bit. Okay, something like that maybe. All right, now another thing I want to do is make it so that all the materials match, and we're going to add in lots of shapes, but at this point I'm going to do that on like off camera and I'll show you the end result. But let's do some work to get the materials to all look the same. So I'm going to jump into the presets. I'm going to go into my Pro Shaders 2. I'm going to go to metal and I'm going to grab brushed metal. Let's see, metal brushed dinged is one I like. So let's just twirl down beam over here for a moment and we'll replace the all the materials except for the light. I'm going to now come into my scene materials. You can see that this has been added. I want to use an instance of it. So I'm going to, instead of just adding it over and over again from here, I want to add it from here because this is an instance and every time I add it to something, it's all going to be linked to this material. So keep going, doing it this way. Maybe a while, folks, so, just chill. Okay, anyway, we'll just kind of jump through having done this for every one of these. Okay, and now jumping forward in time, you can see I've got a lot of different shapes, little 3D objects, and I've reduced it down to these two materials. This is just there from the original cube that we don't see, but the light, anything that has a light material in it is an instance of this one right here. So if I were to change the color, let's say I were to go into that material and change the color to like a more intense blue, right? So click OK, and we can see now that every other material, everything else that has lights, they're all blue now. All right, let's hit OK and see how things look. Okay, that is looking really cool. So from here, you can add a glow. There's a couple of different ways. I did it probably a different way than you might want to, but let me just show you. One way that comes with Element is in the render settings, there is a glow option, and you can tell it to enable the glow and use only the illumination. You can lower the glow radius a little bit and maybe lower the glow intensity just a bit. That's pretty cool. I happen to like Red Giant's got optical glow. So what I would do here instead, so let me just turn off this glow. That's one option. I'm going to use optical glow, and what I'll do is I'm actually going to duplicate this layer right here. So hit Control D or Command D on a Mac. And so now I've got two instances of Element 3D with the exact same look. And I'm going to go into the output area right here. And instead of composite, I'm going to choose illumination. So what I've got here is just the illuminated parts, right? And I'll set this to screen. So we're just seeing the brightness here only. And I'll choose Effect, RG, VFX, and Optical Glow. You could also try using After Effects as standard glow. I just happen to really like Optical Glow and the way that it looks. I'm going to lower the size of it, lower the amount, and probably let's just try to turn up the vibrance a little, maybe even colorize it. See if that gets a little too intense. Let's come over to here. But yeah, you can see why I like that optical glow effect. And if I rotate around, this is just looking super cool. And the version that you saw that I did, I was just using depth of field and rotating in 3D, but it's pretty much this thing. So not bad. I mean, when you do it yourself, this is going to go a lot faster. Obviously, I had to walk you through how to use everything, but this is super cool. By the way, at the beginning of the tutorial, when I showed the word Greebles being formed by lots of Greebles, all I did was create a 3D text object in Cinema 4D, which I then sent into Element. So essentially, it's the same exact concept as the cube, except we're using a 3D model of text. As always, I hope that this helps you in your work. Once again, I'm Aharon Rabinowitz. I'll see you soon.